Dr. Thierry de Montbrial, founder and chairman of the World Policy Conference, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to join you all this evening. Thierry, thank you for the invitation. To begin, I want to commend you for continuing to steer the debate about global governance in the right direction. You have managed to do this by bridging different perspectives, and I applaud you for this. For decades, the golden age of globalization was built on the assumption that easily attainable. Today, however, the very global networks that were supposed to bring us closer together have become a source of vulnerability. Global integration produces shared gains, but in moments of crisis, it can also lead to choke points. The COVID pandemic was a wake-up call. For one, it reminded us that crises are no longer confined within borders. They easily spread. Secondly, it showed us the downside of trading resilience for efficiency. When manufacturing hubs are concentrated in a few countries, those nations will prioritize their citizens when there is shortage. Today, ongoing conflicts are exposing the same structural fragility in the international system. The flow of essential goods can be blocked at a single point of failure, and everyone ends up paying the price. Political scientists call this weaponized interdependence. Secondly, it showed us the downside of trading for Africa. What these external shocks reveal, as I said, dependency. For this day, many blame the era of colonialism and structural adjustment for this mindset. While true, in a sense, the habit of making excuses only traps us in a cycle where we see ourselves as victims with no power to change our circumstances, and that is completely false. In Rwanda, in the aftermath of 1994, genocide against the Tutsi, we learned that the best solution found directed to our local context yield the highest returns. This is why in the past few years, there have been more efforts within Africa to mobilize domestic resources, localize production, strengthen our supply chains, and integrate our economies. A more self-reliant Africa, with its own fertilizer plants, oil refineries, and pharmaceutical farms, will contribute more positively to global stability. What Africa wants is simple: to take care of ourselves and work productively and respectfully with others. It is not the solution. It will bring rivalry and breed division. Viewing development as a positive sum game rather than a competition can bring the predictability and coherence that our global system desperately needs. The question is not whether we can build a perfectly balanced world. It's whether we can coexist even with our differences and still prosper together. Thierry, I look forward to our conversation, and I thank you all for your kind attention.
So we have a few minutes to discuss, to exchange some ideas on some specific subjects. My first question would be looking at the increasing chaos today in the world. Before, hopefully, we return to some more structured and stable organization of some sort or order of some sort. What are the consequences of this global disorder on Africa overall, if this question have a sense, and more specifically in your, generally speaking, and particularly in your apparent attempts from President Trump to solve the also maybe wider issues?
Well, looking at the global order, one can only say there is a lot to be done to go back to some kind of order that there has been for the last decades, maybe 4 or 5 decades. But even then, when we have assumed that the global order has been, in a sense, stable, there are many things that needed to change in order to make it more stable, reach more work in progress. But at the same time, what we have today, what we see, is something maybe many people here, all of us, saw coming over time. There have always been inequalities, there have always been points of conflict, there have always been, for example, if you look at the global north versus the global south, it has always been taken for granted that what happens in the global south will always be dependent on and determined by the global north. Even if there have been challenges and people have raised those points that needed to be looked at, still it is like established that things must remain like that. And it involves a lot of if we look at the big powers, when anything threatens their interests, and nobody should complain. When the smaller countries, even maybe middle powers, see something that threatens them that is even more fundamental than just answering to the interests. The immediate thing is blame, punishment, criticism, all kinds of things. So which means the smaller powers, the smaller countries, the middle powers are just supposed to toe the line, simple. So if this was the case then, which it was, what was the state of affairs as we look at the international system as such? Who decides what is wrong? Who decides what is right? And on what basis? Is it just that you have the power, therefore you will decide what is wrong and what is right? So Africa has been affected anyway all along. It's not just around this crisis that Africa is being affected. It has been affected even when things look stable globally. Under this structure where it is do as I say and as I tell you, and back to the current situation you referred to in our region, the troubles there, and so on and so forth. These troubles in the region and how they have been approached is one thing. Because let's say the Eastern Congo problems, which you alluded to, and how the administration in the United States has tried to handle that. And maybe other powers also have been involved before and maybe now partially. You see, problems cannot be addressed overnight. Crises cannot be overcome in such a short time. But there is a need to look at the root causes of everything and then give time to dialogue for people to find a win-win kind of solution. So what we are expecting from and have been having from the efforts, whether it is in Washington or there has been Doha processes to try and address the problems in our region. Again, sometimes you find there are things happening that you would question or that are wanting, that are not really addressing the root causes of the problems, and that the dialogue is not about the issues affecting people, it's just how the interests play into all that to determine the outcome of every step of the way.
If we take as an example the current war in the Middle East, Iran war, and its consequences in the Gulf countries and so forth and so on, what would be the major risk for the future in your mind? Do you think that that war could degenerate, that there could be a total loss of control? You have very good relations with the Gulf countries yourself. I mean, Rwanda has good relations with the Emirates, with Qatar. And do you think that there could be that the existence itself of the Gulf countries could be threatened, that borders in that region could be put into questions, that there could be a major shift in the whole structure of the Middle East and security system, and is it something that could be perceived by you and other countries in East Africa as a major risk?
Where we are, we're starting with the place itself, the region, Gulf region, and I think things are bad, and they can get worse. There's no question about that. The situation is very bad, and the big powers need to quickly find a solution. Otherwise, it generates into a bigger problem for the whole world. There's no question about it. You can see the food prices and affecting millions, hundreds of millions of people, and that will cascade into many other things and regions. There's no question about that. There is that potential of things getting worse, and for everybody. So it's not going to remain confined in that region. The region is already suffering, of course, and then with that, what is expected, what the whole supply chain of things that people expect originating from there are things are being crippled and with the clear consequences. So something needs to be done. But we can look to the big powers to say, do something about it. Otherwise, a small country like mine or Africa itself doesn't have much say here in this, other than having to pay a very huge price for what is happening from there.
So I will end this conversation by asking you two questions, but two related, inseparable questions about the so-called West. You know, the number one question is, in your judgment, because these matters are matters of judgment above all. You cannot make specific predictions. A historical accident, or do you think that it will change in a significant and lasting way the governance of the United States and the way it looks at its role in the world? And the second question is about Europe, because I think that if we agree that the future of Europe depends very much on the future of the United States itself, and if the Trump phenomenon will have lasting effects, not only for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but for 20 years maybe, that changes a lot the conception that we might have of Europe. And in that case, how do you see the future of Europe, of the European Union? And in your judgment, what should be, even in that case, Europeans could play a significant role, a positive in your judgment, and to contribute to stabilize also at least the the African geopolitics?
Well, I talk more about the West than Trump. I think the West is what has produced whoever you want to name to emerge, to be where. So, but the West, I think, has taken things for granted, in my view. Taken things for granted that they know everything, they have everything, they can decide on everything, and the others who are not from the West don't matter. They will just anyway toe the line, and that's it. So what is happening in the West today, producing any leader that is there or that will come in the future, what is happening in the West is what is producing. The West has taken things for granted. But even internally, internally in the West, there are things that need to be resolved. And that's why there will be challenges in every country or in the entirety of European Union or other places of the West, including United States. They assumed that everything was okay within their own sphere of influence and interest. And what was wrong was always in the rest of the world, not with them. But I think there are people so in the West. There are people, there are leaders, there are civil society, there are business, and so on and so forth. But there are ordinary people who all this rises from. So the reaction is that produces different leaders that people may either appreciate or complain about or do that is the contradiction within the society that has not been properly addressed, and as I said, that people took for granted. But in the end, it has to find a way to surface, and you have to deal with it. And for us in Global South Africa and my country, I have said it, we have had a history that has not so much to be proud of in terms of development, in terms of prosperity, and therefore stability. We have had tribal, instead of having real nations, even if it was to bring together tribes. But what made it worse, instead of being able to build our own systems and capacities and cooperate with others, we also accepted the dictates that have been brought to us from the North. So in our case, if you look at, as I did allude to that, in trying to build from nothing, like in my country, which was literally destroyed, and we have had to build, and we are making some progress. We are not where we want to be at all yet. But we looked within and found the efforts to rebuild our country even if we had to be partners with different people and we got a lot of support but we had to start with ourselves. And I think the continent needs to do that. The continent needs to look at what it has, almost everything. The people, the other resources, and the good cultures that can be drawn from a lot of knowledge and practices that make people proud of who they are. So we don't do that. We tend to look at, somewhere else. And then we find these powers also who want to impress upon us that we really don't have much, we don't mean much, we can only survive because of them. So this notion has to be challenged and has to be challenged by all of us. In fact, including even from the north, the very people that this originates from also have to challenge it. So more cooperation, more respect for each other, and not assuming that it is one side that decides what is wrong and what is right. There has to be rejection and moving global environment. You know, people talk about the rules-based international system. Which are these rules? Who makes them? And if we really were to respect the rules, why then do we have these troubles, even from originating from the big powers? Why would we have that? So there is a lot of work to do for all of us. Even from small countries like mine, we can at least raise a voice and shout and say, maybe if we did this, we could. So everyone should have some space to express themselves and contribute what is good for everyone and for the rest of the world.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I think it's time now for everyone to eat a little bit. By the way, we started to work this morning at 8:30. And even though many of our friends told me that we have not worked enough, but nevertheless, I would like to thank you for your words of wisdom, actually, because there are important things that have to be said and repeated and explained. Thank you very much. And I would recommend everyone here in this room who sometimes speak or comment about Rwanda, I would like to ask all of them to follow my example and to visit Rwanda. I can tell you
You're
it's
welcome.
a fascinating
Absolutely
event.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you.